In the history of the Second World War, a grim place is reserved for the camps that later came to be known as death factories. That was the name given to those monstrous sites created by the Third Reich not only in Germany, but also in Poland, Czechoslovakia, and the occupied territories of the USSR. The label wasn't accidental. These camps were designed as well-oiled facilities where the main output was the mass extermination of prisoners. Naturally, such a task required particular personnel, people who had been trained in advance to shut off any trace of compassion. Years of toxic propaganda did their work. The system found those who were ready to serve without hesitation, and among these volunteer executioners were many women. Female guards became an organic part of the killing machine, doing the same filthy work as the men and throwing themselves into it with frightening zeal. People sometimes called them SS women. Formally, women weren't accepted into the SS, but a special status was invented for them, known as the SS retinue. Some still received ranks that placed them almost on the same level as officers of the order. The most notorious of these women was Maria Mandel. In Auschwitz-Birkenau, she ran the women's camp and was effectively the second most powerful person after the commandant. She officially held the rank of Obersturmbannführer, but her rank was far less terrifying than her reputation. She was known as Maria the Beast, and it wasn't an exaggeration. Her cruelty was so extreme that even among Nazis she was viewed as someone obsessed with sadism. Her word meant everything for the prisoners, life or death. She was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of women and children whom she sent to the gas chambers. A simple execution wasn't enough for her. She liked to play with prisoners the way one might play with animals. She could order a man or woman to act like a dog, a kid goat, a cat. She could force two miserable people to butt heads like rams. This humiliating spectacle amused her. When she grew bored of her performers, their fate was almost always the gas chamber. One of her most horrifying pastimes was a twisted game of fake kindness. She would pick a victim, surround them for a time with what looked like care, wash them in the bathhouse, dress them in clean clothes, give them proper food. She would ask whether anyone was mistreating the prisoner and could speak almost in a motherly tone. People worn down by the hell of the camps saw this as a sign of warmth, the faintest hope. But as soon as her victims let their guard down, Mandel would unleash a fresh wave of torment, usually ending in torture and death. Survivors remembered her genuine laughter during these moments. Once, she took a liking to a small Polish boy, about 5 or 6 years old. She took him under her care, washed him, dressed him, led him around like her own child. A couple of weeks later, he disappeared. His guardian had personally sent him into the gas chamber. That was how Mandel entertained herself, all while remaining perfectly calm. Working next to her was another star of camp sadism, Irma Grese. She was called the Blonde Devil, the beautiful monster, the angel of death. A young woman, striking in appearance, only 20 years old, but inside utterly hollow and cruel. She worked in several camps, but it was in Auschwitz that she built her career. Mandel sensed a kindred nature in her and appointed her senior guard. Survivors said Grese was obsessed with pretty young women and often coerced them into intimacy. These scenes turned into bloody rituals, as a naked man always had to be present, and once her desires were satisfied, Irma killed both victims so there would be no living witnesses. One of her favorite amusements was a kind of roulette. Prisoners were lined up in front of her, and Irma, sitting on a chair, would take out a pistol. They tied a blindfold on her, and she swung the barrel from side to side. No one knew when the shot would ring out or who would fall. Sometimes she did the same thing without a blindfold, simply watching the despair on people's faces. Rumors linked her to Joseph Mengele. They said Irma liked to watch his monstrous experiments and might have been his lover. Grese's image in the camp was unmistakable, a young woman in a blue jacket that showed off her figure, a whip in one hand and a large dog on a leash in the other. She rarely wore a uniform, but heavy boots were always part of her look. Any prisoner who crossed her path could become a target. The whip, kicks from her boots, an attack by her dog. She took real pleasure in watching men writhe in agony after a kick to the groin. Another of her entertainments was setting dogs on children. She could walk into a children's barrack with a glass of milk, lure a child closer, then release hungry dogs on them. Yet another notorious figure was Ilse Koch, better known as the Lady of the Lampshade. She was the wife of Buchenwald Commandant Karl Koch and also the senior female guard. Her nickname was tied to her gruesome hobby. She collected human skin with tattoos and used it to make various items. According to rumors, even lampshades. If someone with a striking tattoo arrived at the camp, especially a man, his fate was essentially sealed. The method was simple. They could even speak with the prisoner, ask about the tattoo's history. Then he would be starved, given only water, so the skin would separate more easily. After that, poison was injected, and Ilse added another piece to her collection. In court, these accusations couldn't be proven. The evidence disappeared, destroyed either by the Koches or the Gestapo. Karl Koch ended up on trial even under the Nazis, not for cruelty, but for embezzlement. He became too carried away with looting prisoners and forgot to share with the right people. He was sentenced to death and executed. It's possible that his execution also served to cover up his wife's crimes. Female guards were highly creative when it came to torment. They arranged races, hitching prisoners to carts where an SS man sat. The team that finished first stayed alive a little longer. The losers were sent to the crematorium. Prisoners could be forced to sing Nazi songs for hours, declare themselves subhuman, or shout degrading slogans. One favorite trial was making prisoners stand with a heavy stone over their head. If their arms gave out and the stone fell, but not on the prisoner's head, they were beaten. Greta Boda, a guard from Bergen-Belsen, particularly liked this trick. One teenage survivor said he saw Boda simply pull out a pistol and shoot two prisoners for no reason, emptying the magazine. The female guards, just like their male colleagues, loved to watch prisoners forced to fight each other like gladiators. Women in uniform often terrified inmates even more than men. It seemed they competed with each other in cruelty. After the war, many faced trial. Maria Mandel and Irma Grese were hanged. Ilse Koch at first received a surprisingly light sentence, serving less than 5 years, but public outrage pushed the authorities to reopen her case, and she was given life. Gertrude Boda was sentenced to 10 years, but served only 6.